California voters chose between several candidates for the governor's spot on Tuesday. Due to California's so-called jungle primary system that we've been talking about, voters are narrowing the race to two candidates who will then face off in November. Is how to solve the state's housing crisis one of the issues? Liam Dillon has reported extensively on that issue. He is a state politics and policy writer for the Los Angeles Times. So, Liam, let's talk about this. When we think about California, we don't think about affordable housing. How critical of an issue is this for voters when it comes to choosing between gubernatorial candidates?
Well, it's extremely critical because people can't afford to live here. I mean, you have housing prices now in California, the median eclipsing $400,000, $500,000, 2.5 times what the national average is. And then you have renters. I mean, you have close to 1.7 million California households paying more than half their income on rent, which is obviously a huge burden on them. And so if people can't afford to live here, that's obviously something that's front of their minds.
You write that candidates have a similar answer to the problem: build more homes. How do they differentiate in their views then?
Sure. It's a very much, I think, for all of the major candidates here, a supply and demand issue. If there's too much demand and not enough houses, then you need to build more. And so they've all sort of embraced that philosophy, and that's something that they're all looking to try to promote in the state. That being said, I think you'll certainly see between the Democrats who are running and the Republicans a lot different emphasis when it comes to subsidy. The two major Republican candidates in the race, businessman John Cox from San Diego and State Assemblyman Travis Allen from Orange County, they say we don't need any subsidy. We should just let the market do its thing, and that should help everybody. Whereas all the Democratic candidates are looking to invest a lot more state dollars to help finance homes for low-income residents here.
Well, as we just heard from our last guest, you have Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, the front runner. Where does he stand on this issue, and what do the folks who study this issue think about his goals?
Sure. So he is actually the most ambitious housing goals of any of the 6 major gubernatorial candidates. He wants the state to build 500,000 new homes a year, every year for the next 7 years, which is a remarkably high number. Just to put that in context, the state has never built more than 320,000 units a year going back to the mid-50s, and so this would be an order of magnitude higher than that, and wants to do that for 7 years in a row. And so the academics and the experts that I've spoke with in this area really sort of see his plan as being unrealistic, whereas John Cox, who is running, his number is a little bit lower. He wants 300,000 a year for the next decade, but again, that's even that number is pretty ambitious given what the state has done in recent years, where it's averaged less than 100,000 homes a year.
Well, in November, California voters will also weigh in on a rent control measure. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so right now in California, the expanding rent control is pretty much prohibited. There are a number of cities, the big cities around the state, San Francisco and LA in particular, where there are rent control, but that's only for buildings that were built before 1978, roughly around that time period. And that's because of a state law that was passed in the mid-90s called Costa-Hawkins, which prohibits the expansion on a local level of rent control. And so this ballot measure, which is coming almost certainly going to be before voters in November, would repeal Costa-Hawkins, therefore allowing local governments, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, up and down the state to put new rent control measures on properties. And so there's a lot of obviously angst among tenant groups and among renters, particularly low income, that they obviously can't afford to pay these rising home prices and rising rentals. At the same time, there's a lot of argument. A lot of economists don't like the idea of rent control. They think it will restrict housing supply, which again is another big problem in the state. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see here maybe close to $100 million being spent on this campaign when all is said and done on this.
Wow, that's an incredible amount of money. Will candidates' stances on this measure have any impact on how voters vote in Tuesday's primary?
Sure. So there's actually broad agreement. There's only one of the 6 major candidates, Dillon, who's a former state superintendent of public schools, who is in favor of repealing Costa-Hawkins and therefore allowing for the expansion of rent control. So Gavin Newsom, Antonio Villaraigosa, the former mayor of LA, John Cox, all of these folks are opposed to the ballot measure. That said, what Newsom, Villaraigosa, and the other Democrats in the race are arguing is, look, we don't need a full repeal of this law. We'll be able to make some changes, but that's better done through the legislative process than it would be in terms of an initiative.
We have a question from Hari Savugan, our Democratic strategist. Liam, go ahead, Hari.
Thanks. I'd quibble with one thing you said. Instead of being a businessman from San Diego, I would say, given how many times John Cox has run for office there, a businessman from Illinois. But That aside.
That's fair enough. Yeah, that's fair enough.
That aside. My question is, have voters thought about the SALT tax at all as they're thinking about housing issues at the state level? Is that translating to any kind of angst about limitations on their mortgage deductions or their property tax payments?
So there are two bills that are working its way through the legislature now, one on the Assembly side, one on the Senate. They're the two houses in California that aim to sort of do this kind of jujitsu where people will be able to donate money to the state as a charity and then take that as a deduction, the charitable deduction, and therefore sort of work around the SALT plan that was passed in the federal tax reform. And so there are efforts, although that being said, it is a bit surprising given how sort of central California has been to the quote-unquote resistance to Trump, that a lot of other states on the East Coast have taken action on that before California has. And so, you know, the governor here, current governor, Jerry Brown, is kind of lukewarm to those ideas, and that could be one reason why people are moving more slowly in the legislature than they have in other states.
All right, Liam Dillon. Liam, thank you so much. Housing is definitely an issue that is very much top of mind, I know, for a lot of folks there. Thanks.
Thank you.